So, Andrea, you're here today in Sault Ste. Marie. You're going to be giving a speech to the United Steelworkers at their conference later today. What is the message you're going to be sending out to them?
Well, you know what? The message is a pretty basic one. First and foremost, Ontario is a province with a lot of promise. But to realize that promise, we have to work together and make our communities and our province benefit everyone. Right now, there's a small group of very powerful, connected people that seem to be benefiting from the decisions that are being made by the Liberal government. Hydro One is an example of that. A nice small group of well-connected friends of Kathleen Wynne are going to make out like bandits with the sell-off of Hydro One, but the rest of us are going to have to pay the price, and that's bad policy. So we need to change the way things are done in Ontario and make sure that it's everyday families, folks like you and I, that are benefiting from the work the government does. We have a government that has wasted a lot and has not taken care of the basics, things like healthcare. Things like good to decent jobs in communities around Ontario and here in the north. Things like making sure that people have an education system that they can feel confident in. I mean, we're heading into the fall. Who knows what's going to happen?
Just sticking with the hydro topic, you're going to be in Elliott Lake this evening, and that's going to be your subject, is the sell-off of Hydro One. You probably made already a few points on that, but what do you hope to target to this specific?
Well, you know, it's really clear that the sell-off of Hydro One is wrong-headed. It's, first of all, not Kathleen Wynne's to sell off. Hydro One is owned by the people of Ontario, and she has no mandate to sell that off. She went through an election campaign where she was, frankly, dishonest with the people of Ontario and didn't tell them that she had intentions to sell off Hydro One. Having said that, we're going to see rates go up as a result. I mean, we know people can't make ends meet now. We know people can barely afford to pay the bills today. Last time there was privatization in the electricity system in Ontario when the Conservatives did it, the hydro rates went up by 25% almost overnight. So we know that this privatization, this sell-off, is going to jack up the rates and people can't afford it already. We also know that we're going to see reliability perhaps be affected. We've seen this in other jurisdictions. California is a good example, where when the private sector took over their electricity transmission system, all of a sudden there were rolling brownouts occurring because the private company was more interested in keeping a lid on the production of energy and not being so careful about the customer satisfaction there.
PC leader Patrick Brown was up here recently. He had his party caucus in Sault Ste. Marie, and he was asked a few questions about energy and what to do about the high cost. Does your party have a plan to, as you were talking about, try to prevent some of the scenarios you just talked about?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things we're going to see with the sell-off of Hydro One is a huge loss in revenue. I mean, that's the other big issue. Right now, Hydro One brings a lot of revenue into Ontario, and we're going to see that frittered away. Look, the Conservatives haven't really been very clear about what their intentions are. They say that they just don't like the way that Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals are privatizing Hydro One and selling it off. They don't have any problem with privatization. They just would do it differently. We disagree. We think electricity is something that people rely on constantly. It's an essential service. People can't do without it. It should be produced and transmitted to households and businesses and industry around this province in the interest of the public, not in the private interest. And so that's a big difference between us and Patrick Brown and the Conservatives. But what we've talked about, look, everybody knows that there are problems in Hydro One. Everybody knows that there's work that needs to be done there, and we are prepared to do that work. One of the problems with our electricity system is it's so fragmented because of the Conservatives' deregulation and sell-off in the mid-2000s. So it's the Conservatives that actually created a lot of the mess that the Liberals have followed through with. What we would do is we would actually look at those energy contracts that we now have. We'd ask the Auditor General to review those contracts and see if we can get a better deal. Instead of dumping excess power across the border and at rates that are, in fact, that we are paying, we're paying those jurisdictions to take that excess power off of our hands. Power that we pay through the nose to generate, they're taking it off our hands, and that's costing us money. So we would actually look to a more stable system of marketing our power when it's excess in our own interest instead of giving it away on the spot market the way we're doing now. There are a number of agencies in hydro that need to be brought together. There's an alphabet soup of agencies, all kinds of CEOs and executives. We would cap salaries on the executive level. So there's a number of things we've talked about. The idea is there are things that are fixable within the electricity system, but the answer is not to sell it off so that Kathleen Wynne can get $4 billion towards her $130 billion of promises on infrastructure and transit.
A lot of the attention right now is on federal politics, particularly about the federal election campaign. And maybe, Mike, I can get some comments on you as well on this. There's a candidate here, Skip Morrison, who is running for the New Democrats. But Justin Trudeau was here yesterday and in Sudbury earlier in the day talking about clean energy, his multi-million-dollar plan there. Given sort of the momentum that Tom Mulcair has had, do you feel now might be the right time for a federal New Democrat government?
Oh, definitely. I've been hearing from people across the North Shore, including the Sault Ste. Marie area, because people feed in from Algoma, Manitoulin and into this area, and people want to see a change. People are tired of seeing the status quo happening. People want to see a government that thinks about them, that are making decisions based on what their family needs are, and it's time for a change. And I think Tom and Skip are going to be bringing that message in the upcoming federal election.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Thomas Mulcair actually has a concrete plan to bring change to Canada. He's talked about the $15 minimum wage. He's talked about $15 a day childcare so that families can afford to go out and work or go back to school. He's talked about a break for small and medium-sized businesses to try to create good, decent jobs here in the country from coast to coast to coast. I mean, these are our concrete plans that are actually game changers for our country that focus on what people need, and that's where we're different than the other parties. We're talking about concrete changes, and Thomas Mulcair has done a great job in that regard.
Just want to touch on the education situation. What are your feelings on this? All these last-minute negotiations that Premier Wynne and the unions and the school boards are into, given the clock is ticking to September 8th.
Well, I mean, it's a classic and cynical move on the part of the government. I mean, when we left the legislature back in June, they were bragging about the fact that they had 140 days or something of that nature of time to come to a deal with the teachers and the educational workers. And of course, here we are at the 11th hour. Classic move, right? Let's get everybody worked up. Let's create a lot of tension. Let's put the pressure on and try to pull something out of the fire at the last minute, and then look like the big saviors. There's been chaos in our education system for far too long under Kathleen Wynne's watch, and shame on her, because the people that suffer are not only the educational workers, but they're the kids and they're the families who are uncertain about what's going to happen in September. That's no way to govern a province, and that's no way to protect our education system. I think it's outrageous that Ms. Wynne and Ms. Sandals, our Premier, and our Education our Minister, are even contemplating the removal of our caps on class sizes. That's all about the quality of education and the amount of time that teachers have to spend with students. And shame on the Liberals for eroding that gain that was made in education.
Just one last question, if I may, Ms. Horvath. You had a chance a few years ago in 2011 to perhaps become the next Premier of Ontario, and given the momentum that the Democrats have at the federal level, and also given the way things turned out in the last provincial election, do you still feel you have an opportunity, perhaps in the future, to be the next Premier of Ontario?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that that's what we're working towards. We're working towards forming a government here in the province of Ontario to make the kinds of changes that this province deserves, that the people of this province deserve. You know, the Liberals have been in office now for over a dozen years. By the time we get to the next election, it'll be somewhat 14, 15 years that they've been in power. And what have they done? They've wasted and frittered away our money. They have had scandal after scandal after scandal, the most recent one being the scandal with the Sudbury bribery bribery situation where they bribed somebody to stay out of the campaign. That's not what people deserve in this province. They deserve a premier and a government that looks after their issues, that has integrity, and that's prepared to actually look after families. What we see with Liberals here in Ontario is a government that looks after their friends, that looks after the very small, few, powerful friends that have been able to do very well while the rest of us are hanging on by the fingernails.
The party did give you a vote of confidence in the last leadership vote. Will you be the person that actually runs for premier?
Well, I mean, that's always the pleasure of my party. We have another convention coming, I believe, in about a year and a half, and so we'll see what happens there. But look, there's no doubt that Ontarians are, I think, disappointed with what the Liberals promised during the election and are turning into after the election. They talked a good game during the campaign, but of course, everything they talked about has once again turned into nothing. The people of this province deserve better. That's the bottom line. And I'm hopeful that when we get to the next election, we're going to see some real change in this province, change that puts families and people at the top of the agenda.